The child's scream cut through the night like a blade. Sophia Rivers froze on the parked path, her cleaning cart squeaking to a halt behind her. At 2 a.m, Riverside Park should have been empty except for the occasional jogger or insomniac walking their dog. Not a little girl, alone and sobbing on a bench like her world had shattered. "Hey there, sweetheart." Sophia approached slowly, her voice gentle despite the exhaustion weighing down her bones. 3 jobs meant 3 different uniforms, and tonight's cleaning shift at the downtown office complex had run late. Again. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up with the biggest brown eyes Sophia had ever seen. Maybe 6 years old, with dark curls escaping from what had once been neat pigtails. Her dress was expensive, the kind Sophia's daughter Emma would have coveted in the store windows they passed but never entered. "I can't find my daddy," the girl whispered, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "He was supposed to come get me after his business meeting, but that was hours ago." Business meeting. At midnight. Sophia's stomach tightened with familiar dread, but she pushed it down. Not every powerful man was like Marcus. Not every late-night meeting meant what hers had. "What's your name, honey?" "Aria." The girl straightened up with sudden composure that seemed far too mature for her small frame. "Aria Blackwood. My daddy owns lots of buildings, and people come to see him when it's dark because that's when he does his important work." Blackwood. Even Sophia, who lived paycheck to paycheck and avoided the society pages, had heard that name. Real estate empire. Old money. The kind of family that could make problems disappear with a phone call. "Well, Aria, how about we call your daddy? Do you know his number?" Aria shook her head. "I'm not supposed to use phones. Daddy says they're not safe." She looked around the empty park, her composure cracking. "But he's never been this late before." "Never." Sophia sat down on the bench, her mind racing. A 6-year-old alone at midnight, talking about business meetings and phone safety like she'd been coached. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, but what could she do? Call the police and risk destroying this little girl's life if there was an innocent explanation? "Tell you what," Sophia said, pulling out her ancient cell phone. "Why don't we wait here together for a few more minutes? If your daddy doesn't show up soon, we'll figure out how to find him." Aria scooted closer, small and warm against Sophia's side. "You smell nice. Like flowers and safety." The words were odd, but something in Aria's tone made Sophia's chest tighten. When was the last time someone had felt safe with her? When was the last time she'd felt safe herself? They waited in comfortable silence, Aria's breathing gradually evening out as she relaxed. Sophia found herself studying the shadows between the trees, alert for any sign of movement. The park felt different tonight. Expectant. Like the darkness itself was holding its breath. The low rumble of an engine made them both look up. A black SUV slid through the park's entrance like liquid shadow, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Tinted windows reflected nothing, giving no hint of who sat behind them. The vehicle moved with predatory grace, too smooth and quiet for something so large. Aria sat up straight. "Daddy's here." The SUV stopped 20 feet away, engine still running. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. Sophia's breath caught. Tall didn't begin to describe him. He moved like controlled violence, every step deliberate and measured. The expensive suit did nothing to soften the raw power that seemed to radiate from him. If anything, the civilized clothing made him seem more dangerous, like a wolf in sheep's clothing who wasn't bothering to hide his teeth. Dark hair, dark eyes that found hers instantly across the distance. And something else, something that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. The way he looked at her wasn't casual recognition or polite gratitude. It was intense. Knowing. Like he'd been looking for her specifically and had finally found what he'd been hunting. "Daddy." Aria jumped off the bench and ran to him, her small form swallowed up as he scooped her into his arms. "Aria." His voice was deep, rough around the edges despite the cultured accent. I told you to stay with Harrison. Harrison fell asleep, and I got scared when you didn't come back. So I went looking for you, but I got lost. Aria's explanation came out in a rush. But this nice lady stayed with me. She smells like safety, Daddy. And flowers. Those dark eyes fixed on Sophia again over his daughter's head. She stood slowly, suddenly conscious of her rumpled cleaning uniform and the exhaustion she knew was written across her face. Next to his expensive suit and obvious wealth, she felt small and insignificant. But she didn't feel afraid. She should have. Every instinct honed by her marriage to Marcus should have been screaming at her to run from this man's obvious power and barely contained intensity. Instead, something deep in her chest was humming, like a tuning fork struck by the perfect note. Thank you. He walked toward her, and Sophia caught a hint of his scent, something wild and clean, like pine forests and winter air. For staying with her. Anyone would have done the same thing. Sophia's voice came out steadier than she felt. She's a sweet girl. Not anyone. He stopped just close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Most people would have called the authorities and walked away. There was something in his tone, a weight that suggested he knew exactly what kind of people inhabited his world. The kind who would see a lost child as someone else's problem, or worse, an opportunity. I'm not most people. His mouth curved in what might have been a smile if it had reached his eyes. No. You're not. The moment stretched between them, heavy with something Sophia couldn't name. Aria stirred in her father's arms, breaking the spell. What's your name? The little girl asked. Sophia. Sophia Rivers. Sophia. The way he said her name sent warmth curling through her stomach. Like he was tasting it, memorizing it. I'm Kieran Blackwood. As if she wouldn't have known. As if the Blackwood name wasn't whispered in the same breath as words like ruthless and untouchable. Daddy, can Sophia come have dinner with us? She looks hungry. Heat flooded Sophia's cheeks. Oh, no, that's not necessary. I should get home to my daughter. Something flickered across Kieran's face. You have a daughter. It wasn't a question, but Sophia nodded anyway. Emma. She's 7. And her father? The question was casual, but there was steel underneath it that made Sophia's spine straighten. Not in the picture. For a moment, Kieran's control slipped, and something predatory flashed behind his eyes. Something that suggested whoever Emma's father was, he'd better hope they never met. Daddy gets mad when people hurt kids, Aria said matter-of-factly, as if she'd read her father's expression perfectly. He says it's his job to protect people who can't protect themselves. Kieran's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Aria. It's okay. Sophia took a step back, suddenly aware that she was standing far too close to a man who could probably buy and sell her entire neighborhood without blinking. I really should go. Emma will be worried if I'm much later. She started to turn away, but Kieran's voice stopped her. Sophia. She looked back over her shoulder. Be careful walking alone at night. The city can be dangerous for someone like you. Someone like her. Human, he meant, though she didn't understand why that word had popped into her head. Vulnerable. Breakable. Alone. I always am. She walked away without looking back, but she could feel his eyes on her until she disappeared around the corner. Only then did she hear the SUV's engine purr to life, fading into the distance as it carried Kieran Blackwood and his unusual daughter back to whatever world they inhabited. Sophia made it 3 blocks before she had to stop and lean against a streetlight, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. What the hell had just happened? She'd met powerful men before. Marcus had introduced her to plenty during their marriage, politicians, business owners, men who thought their money made them untouchable. They'd all made her skin crawl with their wandering eyes and careless cruelty. Kieran Blackwood was different. Dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with money or social standing. When he'd looked at her, she'd felt, claimed. Like he'd already decided she belonged to him and was just waiting for her to figure it out. The smart thing would be to forget this ever happened. To go home to Emma and their tiny apartment and their safe, predictable life. To never think about dark eyes and expensive suits and little girls who talked about safety like it was something you could smell. But as Sophia walked home through the empty streets, she couldn't shake the feeling that forgetting Kieran Blackwood was going to be impossible. And somewhere, in the deepest part of her mind where instinct lived, a voice whispered that she didn't want to forget him at all. Chapter 2. The knock on Sophia's apartment door came at exactly 7 in the morning, 3 days after the park incident. She knew it was trouble before she even opened it. Good news never arrived at dawn in her neighborhood, and the measured, deliberate rhythm of the knocking belonged to someone who expected to be answered. Someone used to having doors opened for them. "Just a minute," she called, frantically smoothing down her sleek-mussed hair and checking that her robe was properly tied. 4-year-old Ethan was still asleep in the bedroom they shared, and she prayed he'd stay that way. Her son had enough questions about why Mommy worked so much. He didn't need to witness whatever this was about to be. She opened the door and her breath caught. Kieran Blackwood stood in her dingy hallway like he'd materialized from another dimension. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. More real. More, there. "Mr. Blackwood." Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "How did you find you?" His mouth curved in that almost smile she remembered. "I have resources." Of course he did. Men like him always had resources. The question was what he wanted to use them for. "Is Arya okay?" The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Did something happen? Something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe, or approval. "She's fine. May I come in?" Sophia glanced back at her tiny apartment with its second-hand furniture and peeling wallpaper. The contrast between his obvious wealth and her circumstances felt like a chasm she couldn't bridge. But refusing him felt impossible, like trying to say no to a force of nature. Of course. He stepped inside, and immediately the space felt smaller. Not just because of his height, but because of the way he moved, controlled, predatory, aware of everything around him. His dark eyes catalogued her small living room in seconds, the fold-out couch that served as her bed, the card table where she and Ethan ate their meals, the basket of laundry she'd been too exhausted to fold. "Coffee?" she offered, because her mother had raised her to be polite even when her world was tilting sideways. "Please." She busied herself in the kitchenette, grateful for something to do with her hands. The coffee maker was ancient and loud, but it worked. Behind her, she could feel Kieran's presence like heat from a fire, warm and dangerous and impossible to ignore. "You work 3 jobs, he said when she handed him a chipped mug. It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. Cleaning office buildings at night, data entry during the day, and weekend shifts at the diner on 5th Street. "When do you sleep?" The concern in his voice caught her off guard. When was the last time someone had asked her that? When was the last time someone had cared about the answer? "When I can." She settled onto the opposite end of the couch, tucking her legs under her. "Ethan's a good sleeper, so I usually manage a few hours in the afternoon." Kieran's jaw tightened. "That's not sustainable." "It's what I have to do." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but she was tired of being judged for the choices she'd had to make. "I provide for my son. We have a roof over our heads and food on the table. It's enough." "Is it?" His dark eyes met hers, and she saw something there that made her chest tighten. Not pity, she couldn't have handled pity. Understanding, maybe. Recognition of a fellow fighter. "When was the last time you bought something just because you wanted it? When did you last take Ethan somewhere fun, just to see him smile?" The questions hit too close to home. She looked away, focusing on the steam rising from her coffee cup. "I have a proposition for you." Her head snapped up. "What?" "Arya needs a nanny. Someone to stay with her during the day, help with her education, provide stability." He leaned forward slightly, his intensity focused on her like a laser. "I'd like to offer you the position." Sophia stared at him. I don't have any formal childcare experience. But you stayed with a frightened child in a park at 2 in the morning. You comforted her. Made her feel safe. His voice softened slightly. Experience can be taught. Genuine caring cannot. Mr. Blackwood. Kieran. The way he said his name sent warmth spiraling through her stomach. Kieran, I'm flattered, but I couldn't possibly. The salary is $60,000 a year, plus full benefits. Housing provided, meals included. Ethan would be welcome to live with us, and I'd arrange for his enrollment in the best private school in the city. The numbers hit her like a physical blow. $60,000 was more than she made from all 3 jobs combined. Benefits meant health insurance, real health insurance, not the catastrophic coverage she couldn't afford to use. Private school for Ethan meant opportunities she'd only dreamed of giving him. That's too much, she whispered. It's what the position is worth. To you, maybe. But I'm not qualified for a job that pays. Arya asked for you specifically. The words stopped her protest cold. What? Kieran set down his coffee cup and ran a hand through his dark hair. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain. Almost vulnerable. She's been having dreams. About you. For weeks before we met you in the park. He met her eyes again, and she saw something there that made her skin prickle with awareness. She kept talking about the nice lady who smells like flowers, said I needed to find you because you were important. I thought it was just childhood fantasy until you found me in the park. He nodded. She knew you'd be there. Knew you'd help her. Sophia's rational mind rejected what he was saying. Children didn't have prophetic dreams. They didn't know strangers were coming into their lives. But something deeper, something instinctive, whispered that he was telling the truth. That's impossible. Is it? His voice was careful, measured. Haven't you ever known something you couldn't explain? Felt drawn to a place or a person for no logical reason? She had. Standing next to him in the park, she'd felt that inexplicable pull. Like recognition, like coming home to a place she'd never been. Even if that were true, she said slowly, I can't just accept charity. It's not charity. It's employment. Arya needs stability, and frankly, so do I. My work keeps me away from home more than I'd like. Having someone I trust taking care of her would be invaluable. Trust. He'd known her for all of 20 minutes 3 days ago, and he was talking about trust. You don't know anything about me. I could be anyone. I could. You could be dangerous. That almost smile appeared again. Sophia, I know more about you than you might think. I know you've been working yourself to exhaustion for over a year to support your son. I know you left your ex-husband after he. His expression darkened, and for a moment she saw something predatory flash behind his eyes. After he hurt you. I know you've never missed a rent payment, never failed to provide for Ethan, never asked for help even when you desperately needed it. Heat flooded her cheeks. You had me investigated. I protect what's mine. The words came out with such quiet intensity that they seemed to vibrate in the air between them. And anyone who might become important to my daughter is worth protecting. There was something in the way he said mine that made her pulse quicken. Not possessive in the ugly way Vincent had been possessive, but protective. Claiming, but in a way that felt like shelter rather than a cage. I need to think about it. Of course. He stood, and she felt the loss of his presence like a physical ache. Take all the time you need. But Sophia? She looked up at him. Don't let pride cost you and Ethan this opportunity. Sometimes accepting help isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the brave thing to do. After he left, Sophia sat on her couch and stared at the business card he'd left on her coffee table. Kieran Blackwood, CEO, Blackwood Industries. A phone number printed in elegant script. She was still sitting there an hour later when Ethan wandered out of the bedroom, his dark hair sticking up in every direction. Morning, baby. She pulled him onto her lap, breathing in his sleepy warm scent. "Did you sleep okay?" He snuggled against her chest. "I had a dream about a big house with lots of rooms. And there was a girl there who looked sad, but then you came and she got happy." Sophia's blood turned to ice. "What did you say?" "I dreamed about a house." "Can we go see it, Mama?" "The girl in my dream said she was waiting for us." For a moment, Sophia couldn't breathe. First Arya having dreams about her, now Ethan dreaming about Arya. It was too much coincidence. Too much to dismiss as childhood imagination. She was still trying to process it all when her phone rang. Vincent's name appeared on the caller ID, and her stomach dropped to her toes. "Hello, Vincent." "Sophia." Her ex-husband's voice was smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "I hear you've been making some interesting new friends." Her grip tightened on the phone. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Kieran Blackwood?" "Really, Sophia, I thought you'd learned your lesson about associating with dangerous men." "How did he know?" "How could he possibly know about Kieran?" "My associations are none of your business." "They are when they involve my son." Vincent's voice turned cold. "I've been doing some research on your new friend. The Blackwood family has quite a reputation. Violence. Illegal activities. Not the kind of people I want around Ethan." "You don't get a say in who's around Ethan. You signed away your parental rights." "Did I? Are you sure about that?" "Because I think if I took you back to court, showed them how you're exposing our son to criminals and lowlifes, any judge would see that Ethan belongs with me." The threat hung between them like poison. Vincent had money, connections, lawyers who could twist the truth until black looked white. If he really wanted to take Ethan away from her. "What do you want, Vincent?" "Stay away from Blackwood. Quit whatever job he's offered you. Keep living your quiet little life in your quiet little apartment, and we'll have no problems." The line went dead. Sophia sat there holding the phone, her hands shaking. Ethan was still curled against her chest, humming softly to himself, completely unaware that his world might be about to shatter again. She could do what Vincent wanted. Turn down Kieran's offer, keep working herself to death, stay invisible. Keep Ethan safe. Or she could take the chance Kieran was offering. Give Ethan opportunities she'd never dreamed of. Risk everything for the possibility of something better. She looked down at her son's sweet face and made her choice. An hour later, she called the number on Kieran's business card. "I'll take the job," she said when he answered. "When do we start?" There was a pause, and when he spoke again, she could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "Pack your things. I'll send a car for you this afternoon." "Kieran? About what you said earlier, about knowing things you can't explain?" "Yes. I think you're right. I think some things are just meant to be." "Yes," he said quietly. "I think they are." After she hung up, Sophia looked around her tiny apartment one last time. Tomorrow, she and Ethan would wake up in the Blackwood mansion. In a world she knew nothing about, working for a man who made her feel things she'd forgotten she could feel. Vincent's threats echoed in her mind, but for once, fear wasn't the strongest emotion in her chest. For the first time in years, she felt something else. Hope. Chapter 3. The Blackwood mansion was a fortress disguised as a home. Sophia had realized that within hours of moving in 2 weeks ago. The estate sprawled across 50 acres of pristine grounds, surrounded by walls that looked decorative but felt decidedly functional. The staff moved with military precision, and every window on the first floor was reinforced with what looked like decorative metalwork but felt like something much stronger. It should have felt like a prison. Instead, for the first time in years, Sophia felt safe. The feeling made no logical sense. She was living in the home of a man she barely knew, dependent on his generosity, vulnerable in ways she'd sworn she'd never be again. But when she woke up each morning in the beautiful guest suite she shared with Ethan, when she watched her son play in the mansion's vast gardens with Arya, when she caught Kieran watching her with those dark, intense eyes across the dinner table, She felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Which was ridiculous, because nothing about this place was normal. Mrs. Rivers? The voice behind her made Sophia jump, spinning away from the kitchen window where she'd been watching the children play. Marcus stood in the doorway, Kieran's head of security, though his job description seemed to encompass everything from bodyguard to butler to mysterious problem solver. He was built like a linebacker, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. "I'm sorry," Sophia said, pressing a hand to her racing heart. "I didn't hear you come in." Marcus's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. "Light on my feet, I suppose. Mr. Blackwood wanted me to remind you about tonight's dinner. He has a business associate joining us." Business associate. Sophia had learned that was code for someone from Kieran's mysterious otherworld, the one that involved midnight meetings and unexplained disappearances and conversations that stopped abruptly when she walked into a room. "Of course. Should I keep the children upstairs?" "No need. Dr. Elena Chen is quite fond of young ones." Something in his tone suggested there was more to that statement, but before Sophia could ask, a crash from outside made them both freeze. Through the window, she saw Ethan lying motionless at the bottom of the oak tree he'd been climbing, Arya kneeling beside him with her small hands pressed to his chest. Sophia's world went white with terror. She was moving before conscious thought kicked in, bursting through the kitchen door and racing across the lawn. Behind her, she could hear Marcus shouting something, but the words were lost beneath the roar of panic in her ears. "Ethan." She dropped to her knees beside her son, her hands hovering over his still form. His face was pale, too pale, and there was blood seeping from a gash on his forehead. "Baby, can you hear me?" He didn't respond. Didn't move. Didn't. "He's okay," Arya said softly, her brown eyes luminous in the afternoon light. "I promise, Sophia. He's going to be okay. We need to call an ambulance." "We need," Sophia's voice broke as she reached for her phone with shaking hands. "Look," Arya whispered. Sophia looked down and her breath caught. The gash on Ethan's forehead was closing. Actually closing, the torn skin knitting itself back together like an invisible needle was stitching it shut. The blood was disappearing, and the unnatural pallor was fading from his cheeks. "What?" Sophia's voice came out as barely a whisper. "What's happening?" Arya's small hands were still pressed to Ethan's chest, and now Sophia could see they were glowing. Faintly, like sunlight through honey, but definitely glowing. "Arya." Kieran's voice cut through Sophia's shock like a blade. She looked up to find him standing over them, his face carved from stone. "Step back. Now." "But Daddy, I had to." "Now, Arya." The little girl pulled her hands away, and the glow faded. Ethan's eyes fluttered open, confused but alert. "Mama?" He sat up slowly, one small hand going to his forehead where the gash had been. There wasn't even a scar. "Did I fall?" Sophia gathered him into her arms, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Over his head, she stared at Kieran with wide, demanding eyes. "Inside," he said quietly. "All of us. We need to talk." 10 minutes later, they were gathered in Kieran's study, a masculine room lined with books and dominated by a massive desk that looked like it belonged in a medieval castle. Ethan was curled up in a leather chair, completely recovered and happily eating the cookies Marcus had provided. Arya sat close to her father, uncharacteristically subdued. Sophia stood by the window, her arms wrapped around herself, trying to process what she'd seen. "You're going to tell me it was my imagination," she said without turning around. "That I was panicked and seeing things that weren't there." "No." Kieran's voice was quiet, careful. "I'm not going to tell you that." She turned to face him. "Then what are you going to tell me?" For a long moment, he just looked at her. In his dark eyes, she saw regret and something that might have been fear. "The truth," he said finally. "Or as much of it as I can without putting you in more danger than you're already in." "More danger?" Sophia's voice pitched higher. "What does that mean?" It means the world is not what you think it is, Sophia. There are things that exist in the shadows, things most humans never see and never need to see. My family, we're part of that world. She stared at him. What kind of things? Instead of answering, Kieran looked at his daughter. Arya, show her. Daddy, you said I should never. Show her. Arya slipped off her chair and walked to the center of the room. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and held out her hands. The air around her began to shimmer. Light, pure, golden light, began to emanate from her skin. Not just her hands this time, but all of her, until she looked like a small angel carved from sunbeams. I'm a healer, Arya said, her voice carrying an odd, melodic quality that hadn't been there before. It's what I am. What I was born to be. The light faded, and she was just a 6-year-old girl again, looking anxiously between her father and Sophia. How? Sophia's voice came out as a whisper. Magic, Kieran said simply. The kind that's been in my family for generations. The kind that makes us different from ordinary humans. Different how? He was quiet for so long that Sophia thought he wouldn't answer. Then, between one breath and the next, he changed. His features didn't alter dramatically, but everything about him became more intense, more powerful, more dangerous. His eyes flashed gold for just an instant, and when he smiled, she caught a glimpse of teeth that were too sharp to be entirely human. We're werewolves, Sophia. Shapeshifters. Guardians of the balance between the human world and the supernatural one. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Sophia sank into the nearest chair, her legs no longer able to support her. Werewolves. You're telling me werewolves are real? As real as you are. And Arya? Not a shapeshifter. Her gift manifested differently. She's what we call a light bearer, a healer of extraordinary power. Sophia looked at the little girl who had become so precious to her in such a short time. Is that why you needed a nanny? Because she's special? Partly. But also because she dreamed of you. Saw you coming into our lives weeks before we met. Kieran's expression softened slightly. She knew you were meant to be here, Sophia. Knew you were important. Important how? Before he could answer, the study door burst open. Dr. Elena Chen rushed in, her usually pristine appearance disheveled, her dark eyes wide with urgency. Kieran, we have a problem. Vincent Rivers just arrived at the front gate with a court order and 3 very expensive lawyers. He's demanding custody of Ethan, and he's not alone. Sophia's blood turned to ice. Vincent's here? Who's backing him? Kieran asked, his voice deadly quiet. Elena met his eyes. Malcolm Greystone. The name meant nothing to Sophia, but it obviously meant something to Kieran. His face went completely still, and when he spoke, his voice carried the promise of violence. Get the children to the safe room. Now. What's happening? Sophia stood on shaking legs. Who is Malcolm Greystone? A hunter, Elena said grimly. Someone who makes a living destroying people like us. And he's backing Vincent's custody claim? Sophia felt like the world was tilting sideways. Why would he care about Ethan? Kieran and Elena exchanged a look that made Sophia's stomach drop. There's something else, Elena said quietly. Something we discovered when Arya healed Ethan. The healing shouldn't have worked. What do you mean? Arya's gift only works on supernatural bloodlines. The fact that she could heal your son means. Elena paused, choosing her words carefully. It means Ethan isn't entirely human. The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. That's impossible. I'm human. Vincent is human. Ethan can't be. You're not human, Kieran said quietly. Not entirely. Sophia stared at him. What? The connection you feel to this place, to Arya, to me, it's not just coincidence. There's something in your bloodline, something dormant but present. He moved closer, his dark eyes intent on her face. "Tell me about your grandmother, Sophia." "Your mother's mother." "My grandmother?" Sophia's mind reeled. She died when I was young. My mother always said she was different. That she knew things before they happened, could make plants grow just by touching them." "What was her name?" "Luna. Luna Ravenwood." The name felt strange on her lips, like she was speaking a word in a foreign language. "But that doesn't mean anything. People say all kinds of things about old women who live alone." "Luna Ravenwood was one of the most powerful moon witches of her generation," Elena said softly. "She disappeared from the supernatural community 30 years ago. We always wondered what happened to her." "Moon witch?" Sophia's voice came out as barely a whisper. "A magical bloodline as old as ours," Kieran explained. "Healers, seers, protectors of the natural balance. If Luna was your grandmother, then you carry her blood. Diluted, dormant, but present. And Ethan? Would carry it too." The sound of cars pulling up the circular drive cut through the shock settling over Sophia like a shroud. Through the window, she could see black sedans disgorging men in expensive suits. Vincent was here. Vincent and his mysterious backer, this Malcolm Greystone who apparently made a career of hunting people like Kieran. "They know," she whispered, understanding flooding through her. "Somehow, they know what Ethan is. Which is why they want him," Kieran said grimly. "A child with dormant moon witch blood would be incredibly valuable to someone like Greystone. He could use Ethan's power, twist it for his own purposes. Over my dead body." The words came out with such fierce intensity that Sophia surprised herself. Kieran's eyes flashed gold again, and this time they stayed that way. "If necessary," he said quietly, "yes." Outside, car doors slammed, and Sophia heard Vincent's voice carrying across the afternoon air, smooth and confident and utterly without remorse. Her son, her baby, was in danger from forces she was only beginning to understand. But as she looked around the study at these people who had become her family in such a short time, Sophia felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt ready to fight. "What do we do?" she asked. Kieran smiled, and this time his two sharp teeth were fully visible. "We protect our pack," he said. "No matter what it costs." Chapter 4. The first howl split the night like a siren, long and mournful and filled with threat. Sophia jerked awake in her bed, heart hammering against her ribs. Beside her, Ethan stirred but didn't wake. He'd grown used to the strange sounds that surrounded the Blackwood mansion at night. But this was different. This wasn't the patrol runs or the casual communication between pack members she'd grown accustomed to over the past month. This was a battle cry. The second howl came from a different direction, closer to the house. Then a third. And a fourth. The mansion was surrounded. Sophia was already moving, scooping Ethan into her arms and heading for the door, when it burst open. Marcus filled the doorway, his usual calm demeanor replaced by grim urgency. "Safe room. Now." His voice brooked no argument. "We're under attack." "What about Arya?" Sophia clutched Ethan tighter as her son began to wake, confused and frightened by the tension crackling through the air. "Already secured. Move." But as they reached the hallway, the sound of splintering would echoed through the mansion. The front doors, solid oak reinforced with steel, were giving way under an assault that shouldn't have been possible. "Too late," Marcus muttered, his hand going to the weapon at his hip. "They're inside." The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red shadow. In that eerie glow, Sophia saw shapes moving through the main hallway below, large, predatory forms that moved too fluidly to be entirely human. "Mama?" Ethan's small voice was thick with sleep and confusion. "What's happening?" Before Sophia could answer, a new voice cut through the darkness, smooth, cultured, and utterly cold. "Sophia Rivers. How lovely to finally meet you properly." The man who stepped into the circle of emergency lighting was tall and lean, with silver hair and eyes like winter frost. He moved with the same controlled grace as Kieran, but where Kieran radiated protective strength, this man felt like barely contained violence. Damon Cross, Marcus snarled, his hand tightening on his weapon. You have no right to be here. Rights? Damon's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. The old ways are changing, Marcus. The time of territorial boundaries and careful negotiations is over. His pale eyes fixed on Sophia with predatory interest. Especially when such precious cargo is involved. You want the children. Sophia stepped in front of Marcus, placing herself between the stranger and her son. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. That's what this is about, isn't it? Clever girl. Damon's smile revealed teeth that were too sharp, too white. Though I must say, you're even more interesting than I expected. The bloodline is strong in you, I can smell it from here. Before Sophia could ask what he meant, movement in the shadows caught her eye. More figures were emerging from the darkness, men and women who moved with the same predatory grace as their leader. But it was the familiar figure bringing up the rear that made her blood run cold. Vincent. Her ex-husband stepped into the light wearing the same cold smile that had once fooled her into thinking he was capable of love. But now she could see what she'd missed before, the calculation, the complete absence of anything resembling human warmth. Hello, Sophia. You look well. Prosperity suits you. His gaze flicked to Ethan, and something possessive flashed in his eyes. Hello, son. You're with them. The words came out flat, emotionless. She was beyond shock now, moving into the cold clarity that came with absolute betrayal. You're working with them. Working with them? Vincent laughed. Darling, I brought them here. Did you really think I'd let you disappear into this fairy tale without consequences? The court order was a distraction. Something to keep Blackwood and his people focused on legal threats while we prepared the real attack. Vincent's smile widened. Though I must admit, learning about our son's special heritage was an unexpected bonus. Damon stepped forward, his pale eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Vincent has been most helpful. Information about the household routines, the security measures, the children's abilities. Quite thorough. Sophia felt like she was drowning. You sold us out. You sold out your own son. I saved him, Vincent snapped, his mask of civility slipping. From this world of monsters and madness. When Damon is finished with his business here, Ethan will come home with me. To a normal life. After we've trained him to use his gifts properly, of course, Damon added conversationally. A child with moon witch blood is far too valuable to waste on suburban mediocrity. Mama? Ethan's voice was small and frightened. He could sense the danger even if he didn't understand it. Where's Arya? Where's Kieran? Safe, Marcus said quietly, but Sophia caught the lie in his voice. They weren't safe. None of them were safe. Actually, Damon said, pulling out his phone and swiping to a video, I think you'll find that's not entirely accurate. The screen showed Arya in what looked like a cell, her small form curled in the corner. She was alive, but her usual bright energy was dimmed, and there were tears on her cheeks. She's just a child, Sophia whispered, horror and rage warring in her chest. She's the prophesied child, Damon corrected. The light bearer who will unite all supernatural beings under one rule. My rule. His smile turned predatory. Though she's proved surprisingly resistant to cooperation. Perhaps seeing her new family in similar circumstances will motivate her. That was when Sophia understood. This wasn't just about Ethan or even Arya. This was about power, the kind of power that came from controlling people with supernatural abilities. Take me, she said suddenly. Let Ethan go, and I'll come with you willingly. Sophia, Marcus started, but she cut him off. I mean it. You want someone with moon witch blood? Fine. But Ethan is just a child. He can't use his abilities yet. He's no good to you. Damon considered this, his head tilted like a predator evaluating prey. An interesting offer. But I'm afraid I need them both. The child's potential is too great to ignore, and you. His eyes raked over her with clinical interest. You're far more developed than you realize. The power in you is waking up, thanks to your exposure to Blackwood's world. Soon you'll be quite the asset. Before Sophia could respond, new sounds echoed through the mansion, snarls and crashes and the distinctive sound of bodies hitting walls with tremendous force. Kieran's pack was fighting back. "Ah," Damon said, checking his watch with theatrical precision. "Right on schedule. Though I'm afraid your protectors are somewhat outnumbered." Through the broken windows, Sophia could see flashes of movement in the grounds, large shapes locked in combat, supernatural speed and strength on full display. The Shadow Ridge pack had come prepared for war. "It's time to go," one of Damon's people called from the stairway. "Transport is ready." "Excellent." Damon gestured to Vincent. "Collect your son. Carefully, we don't want to damage him." Vincent stepped forward, but Ethan pressed closer to Sophia, his small body trembling with fear. "Don't touch him," Sophia said, her voice deadly quiet. "He's my son. You lost that right the moment you betrayed him." Something in her tone made Vincent pause, uncertainty flickering across his features. Even Damon looked mildly surprised. My, the Alpha murmured. "There's that moon witch fire. I was wondering when it would surface." That was when Sophia felt it, a warmth building in her chest, spreading through her limbs like liquid sunlight. The air around her began to shimmer, and she smelled something impossible, night-blooming jasmine and rain on summer earth. Magic. Real magic, flowing through her veins like it had always been there, just waiting for the right moment to wake up. "Take the children," Damon ordered his people, his casual demeanor sharpening into focused command. "Now." But as his followers moved forward, the mansion's main entrance exploded inward in a shower of wood and metal. Through the destruction came Kieran, no longer bothering to hide his supernatural nature. His eyes blazed gold, his movements carried the fluid power of his wolf form, and the rage rolling off him was palpable. "Get away from my family," he snarled, and the sound carried harmonics that weren't entirely human. The battle that followed was brief and brutal. Kieran moved through Damon's people like a force of nature, but Sophia could see he was already injured. Blood stained his shirt, and his movements, while still devastatingly effective, carried the careful precision of someone fighting through pain. In the chaos, strong hands grabbed Sophia and Ethan. She struggled, but whoever held them was inhumanly strong. The last thing she saw before something covered her head was Kieran going down under 3 attackers, Elena's scream echoing through the mansion as more enemies poured through the breach. Then darkness claimed her. When consciousness returned, Sophia found herself in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Industrial lighting cast harsh shadows across concrete floors and rusted metal beams. The air smelled of motor oil and something else, something wild and predatory that made her skin crawl. Ethan was curled against her side, still unconscious but breathing steadily. Across the room, Arya sat in a makeshift cell, her brown eyes wide with relief at seeing them. "Sophia." The little girl pressed against the bars. "Are you okay? Is Ethan hurt?" "We're fine, sweetheart." Sophia's voice came out as a croak. Her throat felt raw, like she'd been screaming. "Are you hurt?" "No. They haven't hurt me. But..." Arya's voice dropped to a whisper. "There's someone else here. Someone they keep in the back room. She cries sometimes, and she calls for Luna." Sophia's blood turned to ice. "What did you say?" "She calls for Luna. Over and over. Like it's someone she misses. Luna. Her grandmother's name. Well. You're awake." Damon emerged from the shadows, looking immaculate despite the violence at the mansion. "Excellent. We have much to discuss. Where are we?" Sophia struggled to her feet, keeping Ethan behind her. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere Blackwood and his people will never find you." Damon's smile was cold satisfaction. At least, not in time to matter. What do you want? What I've always wanted. Unity among the supernatural communities. An end to the territorial squabbles and petty power games that have kept us weak. His pale eyes gleamed with fanatic fervor. Arya will be the catalyst. Her healing abilities combined with the right persuasion will bring every pack, every coven, every supernatural family under my control. She's 6 years old. She's a weapon. One that will reshape our world. Daemon moved closer, and Sophia caught his scent, cold metal and winter storms. And you, my dear, will help me train her. Your Moon Witch heritage makes you uniquely qualified to understand her abilities. I'll never help you hurt her. Won't you? Daemon pulled out his phone again, but this time the video showed a different cell. A different prisoner. The woman on the screen was older, her dark hair streaked with premature silver, but her face was achingly familiar. She had Sophia's eyes, Sophia's stubborn chin, and when she looked up at the camera, recognition hit like a physical blow. "Hello, baby girl," the woman whispered, her voice barely audible through the phone speaker. "I've missed you so much." Sophia's world tilted sideways. "Mom?" "Very much alive," Daemon confirmed. Though her accommodations have been rather basic for the past 15 years. I've been saving her for just such an occasion. You're lying. But even as she said it, Sophia knew it was the truth. The woman in the video had her mother's scar on her left hand, the one from the kitchen accident when Sophia was 12. Your mother tried to hide from her heritage, just as you did. Married a human, had a human child, pretended the magic in her blood didn't exist. Daemon's voice carried academic interest, like he was discussing a particularly fascinating experiment. But blood will tell, won't it? Especially when it's properly motivated. What have you done to her? Kept her alive. Fed her just enough to maintain her strength. Used her abilities when necessary. His casual tone made the words even more horrifying. She's been quite useful over the years, though her spirit has proved disappointingly resilient. Rage built in Sophia's chest, hot and bright and dangerous. The air around her began to shimmer again, and she smelled jasmine and storm-soaked earth. Now, Daemon continued, apparently oblivious to the building magical energy, you have a choice to make. Cooperate with my plans for Arya, and your mother goes free. Refuse. He shrugged eloquently. Well, 15 years is a long time. I'm sure I can find another 15 if necessary. That was when the warehouse doors exploded inward. Kieran stood in the breach, but he was barely standing. Blood covered his left side, and his face was pale with pain and fury. Behind him came Marcus and Elena, along with several other pack members Sophia recognized from the mansion. Let them go, Cross, Kieran snarled, his voice carrying the promise of violence. Ah, Blackwood. Right on time. Daemon didn't seem concerned by the intrusion. Though you look terrible. That wound needs attention. Kieran took a step forward and swayed. Elena caught his arm, her face tight with worry. He's losing too much blood, she murmured, just loud enough for Sophia to hear. In that moment, Sophia understood the choice she was being forced to make. Kieran needed help, medical attention that only Elena could provide. But her mother was here, somewhere in this building, and this might be the only chance to save her. She couldn't save them both. The weight of that realization settled over her like a shroud, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Sophia felt truly, utterly helpless. Chapter 5. The choice should have been impossible. But as Sophia looked between Kieran's bleeding form and the phone showing her captive mother, something deep inside her chest blazed to life. Not just the warm shimmer of magic she'd felt before, this was different. Powerful. Ancient. Like starlight and moonbeams had taken root in her bones. I choose both, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that weren't entirely human. Daemon laughed. That's not how choices work, my dear. You can't. The words died in his throat as Sophia stepped forward, her hands beginning to glow with silver-white light. Not the gentle golden radiance of Aria's healing gift, this was something older, wilder, touched with the fierce protection of a mother wolf defending her cubs. "You're wrong," Sophia said, and power rolled off her in waves that made the air itself tremble. "I'm not choosing between them. I'm choosing all of them. My son, my pack, my family." Her eyes fixed on Damon with the intensity of a laser. "And I'm choosing to end this." The magic erupted from her like a supernova. Silver light flooded the warehouse, and Sophia felt herself connected to everything, to Kieran's pain and Elena's fear, to Aria's desperate hope and Ethan's confused terror. But more than that, she felt the ancient power singing in her blood, the heritage of 1,000 generations of moon witches who had stood as guardians between the human and supernatural worlds. She reached across the distance to Kieran, her magic flowing through the connection she'd felt from the moment they met. The silver light wrapped around his wounds, knitting torn flesh and replenishing lost blood. She felt his strength return, felt his wolf spirit respond to her power with recognition and gratitude. But she didn't stop there. The magic spread through the warehouse like liquid moonlight, seeking every supernatural presence. She found her mother in a cell 3 rooms away, weak, traumatized, but alive. Sophia's power flowed to her, healing 15 years of careful damage, restoring what had been taken. She found Vincent, cowering behind one of Damon's enforcers, and felt the foreign magic that had been twisted into his system. Not his own power, borrowed strength, purchased loyalty. With surgical precision, Sophia's magic stripped it away, leaving him human and ordinary and completely helpless. And she found Damon himself. The Shadow Ridge Alpha was fighting her power, his own supernatural strength reinforced by decades of stolen magic and forced alliances. But Sophia's heritage was older than his ambitions, her bloodline rooted in the very foundation of supernatural law. "Impossible," he snarled, his composure finally cracking. "You're untrained. Untested. You can't." "I can," Aria's small voice cut through his protests. The little girl had somehow gotten out of her cell and was walking towards Sophia, her brown eyes glowing with their own inner light. "Because she's not just any moon witch. She's the Luna from the prophecy." "Arya, get back," Kieran started, but the child shook her head. "It's okay, Daddy. She won't hurt me." Arya reached for Sophia's hand, and when their fingers touched, the warehouse exploded with silver-gold radiance. "I choose her," Arya said, her voice carrying the weight of ancient magic. "I choose Sophia as my true mother. Not by blood, but by heart. By choice." The words hit the air like a thunderclap, and Sophia felt something fundamental shift in the magical currents around them. Arya's declaration wasn't just sentiment, it was supernatural law. By choosing Sophia as her true mother, the prophesied child had broken any claim Damon might have had over her. "No." Damon lunged forward, but Kieran was already moving. Healed by Sophia's magic, the pack alpha intercepted the attack with the fluid grace of his wolf form. The 2 alphas crashed into a support beam with enough force to shake the entire building. But the fight was already over. Without Aria's compliance, without the borrowed power he'd used to control his followers, Damon was just another alpha facing a unified pack on their own territory. Kieran's people moved with the precision of a military unit, containing Damon's remaining enforcers while their leader dealt with the threat to his family. The battle was brief and decisive. When the silver light finally faded, Sophia found herself surrounded by her chosen family. Ethan was clinging to her leg, his small face pressed against her hip. Arya had wrapped herself around Sophia's waist, her healing light humming contentedly in harmony with the moon witch power still flowing through the air. And Kieran was looking at her like she'd hung the moon itself. "It's over," he said quietly, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "Is it?" Sophia looked around the warehouse, taking in the defeated enemies and the pack members who were looking at her with something that might have been reverence. "What happens now?" Before Kieran could answer, movement in the shadows caught her attention. A woman emerged from the back of the warehouse, moving slowly but under her own power. She was thin, her dark hair streaked with premature silver, but her face was achingly familiar. "Mom?" Sophia's voice came out as barely a whisper. Celeste Rivers, no, Celeste Ravenwood, Sophia realized, stepped into the light with the careful dignity of someone who had survived 15 years of captivity through sheer stubborn will. When she looked at Sophia, tears began streaming down her weathered cheeks. "My baby girl," she whispered. "Look how strong you've become." The reunion was fierce and desperate and tinged with the grief of 15 lost years. Sophia breathed in her mother's familiar scent, lavender and sage, and something wild that she now recognized as magic, and felt a piece of her heart that had been missing since childhood finally clicked back into place. "I thought you were dead," Sophia said against her mother's shoulder. "The car accident was staged," Celeste said quietly. "I knew they were coming for me. For our family. So I made a choice, let them think I was dead, let them take me instead of you." Her hands framed Sophia's face, studying the woman her daughter had become. "I'm so sorry, baby. I thought if I could keep you hidden, keep you human, you'd be safe. Mom." "But there was always a prophecy," Celeste continued, her voice gaining strength. "One my mother told me, and her mother told her. About a moon witch Luna who would be born when the supernatural world faced its greatest crisis. She would have the power to unite all the magical bloodlines, or to destroy them utterly." Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. "Me?" "The choice would be hers," Celeste said, her eyes reflecting pride and terror in equal measure. "To heal or to harm. To bring peace or to bring war." She looked around the warehouse, taking in the defeated enemies and the protective circle of pack members. "It looks like you've already started making that choice." "I chose my family," Sophia said simply. "I chose love. The best choice of all." Kieran's voice was warm with approval and something deeper. When Sophia looked at him, she saw her own feelings reflected in his dark eyes: love, certainly, but also recognition. The bone-deep knowledge that they belonged together, had always belonged together. "So what happens now?" she asked again. "Now," Kieran said, taking her free hand while Arya maintained her grip on the other, "you decide what kind of life you want to build. With us. With your pack." Pack. The word should have felt foreign, but instead it settled around her like a comfortable blanket. These people, werewolves, healers, guardians of the supernatural world, had risked everything to save her and her son. Had welcomed them into their home, their family, their hearts. "I want," Sophia started, then stopped. What did she want? A month ago, her biggest dream had been a job that paid enough for her to work only 40 hours a week. Now she was being offered something beyond her wildest imagination. "Take your time," Kieran said gently. "There's no rush." But Arya looked up at her with those wise brown eyes and smiled. "You already know," the little girl said with the confidence of someone who could see the future. "You knew the moment you chose to save everyone instead of just one person." She was right. Standing in that warehouse, surrounded by the people she'd claimed as family, Sophia realized she'd already made her choice. Had been making it since the moment she'd stayed with a frightened child in a park, since she'd accepted Kieran's impossible job offer, since she'd felt that first flutter of magic in her chest. "I want this," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I want the pack, the magic, the responsibility. I want to be Arya's mother and Ethan's protector and..." She looked at Kieran, her heart hammering against her ribs. "And whatever you need me to be." Something blazed in Kieran's eyes, relief and love and a fierce satisfaction that made her knees weak. "I need you to be my mate," he said quietly. "My Luna. My partner in all things." His expression grew serious, formal. "But that's not a decision to make lightly. Being Luna to a werewolf pack means leaving your human life behind forever. It means accepting responsibilities and dangers you can't even imagine yet. Will you help me learn? Every day for the rest of our lives." Sophia looked around at her chosen family, at Ethan, who was watching everything with the wide-eyed fascination of a child discovering magic was real, at Arya, who was practically glowing with happiness, at her mother, who was crying again but smiling through her tears, at Elena and Marcus and the other pack members who had risked everything to save them. "Then yes," she said, to all of it. Forever. What followed was unlike anything Sophia could have imagined. The pack had traditions, rituals, ceremonies that were older than written history. The formal claiming ceremony took place 3 days later under the full moon, in the garden behind the Blackwood mansion. Sophia wore a dress that had belonged to Kieran's grandmother, ivory silk that seemed to glow in the moonlight, embroidered with symbols she was only beginning to understand. Kieran wore the formal robes of a pack alpha, dark as midnight and embroidered with silver thread that caught the light like starfire. The ceremony itself was ancient and beautiful and somehow completely natural. When Kieran spoke the ritual words claiming her as his mate, when she responded with her own vows of partnership and protection, Sophia felt the magic in her blood sing in harmony with his wolf spirit. And when he kissed her, really kissed her for the first time, she tasted moonlight and wild forests and the promise of forever. "Welcome to the pack, Luna," Elena said afterward, her formal tone undercut by the warm smile on her face. Luna. The title that connected her to her grandmother's heritage and her daughter's future and the ancient prophecy that had shaped her destiny. It should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt like coming home. Later, after the celebration had died down and the pack had returned to their normal routines, Sophia found herself in the mansion's garden with her expanded family. Ethan was curled up in her lap, finally asleep after an evening of being spoiled by his new supernatural relatives. Arya was leaning against Kieran's side, contentedly braiding flowers into chains with magic-enhanced dexterity. Her mother sat nearby, still fragile but growing stronger every day under Elena's care and the healing influence of pack life. Vincent had been dealt with, his memory wiped, his borrowed power stripped away, left to resume his human life with no knowledge of the supernatural world he'd tried to exploit. "No regrets?" Kieran asked quietly, his arm tightening around Sophia's shoulders. She looked around at the peaceful scene, at the moonlit garden and the secure walls and the family that had chosen her as much as she'd chosen them. "None," she said, and meant it completely. In her lap, Ethan stirred and mumbled something in his sleep. As his small hand moved, flowers began to bloom in the grass around them, night-blooming jasmine and moonflowers that opened their petals to catch the silver light. Sophia's breath caught. "Is he showing his inheritance?" Celeste said with quiet pride. Moon-witch gifts often manifest early in times of emotional security. She looked at her grandson with eyes that held both love and ancient knowledge. "He'll be powerful someday. They both will. We'll teach them," Kieran said firmly. "Together. How to use their gifts responsibly, how to protect what matters, how to choose love over fear." Sophia leaned into his warmth and watched her son's unconscious magic paint the garden with impossible beauty. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. She was still learning what it meant to be a Luna, still discovering the extent of her own abilities, still navigating the complex politics of the supernatural world. But tonight, surrounded by her chosen family under the light of the full moon, Sophia Rivers Blackwood felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt completely, perfectly, unshakably happy. And in the distance, barely audible over the night sounds of the awakening garden, she could swear she heard her grandmother's voice on the wind. "Well done, little Luna. Well done." Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also, to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.